Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to have part two of our Battle of the Visas. If you want to look at our link, or maybe in the description, we'll include the link to our previous program where we talked about EB-5 versus NIW, what's faster and what do I prefer. Today I wanted to talk about EB-5 versus EB-3, or we could call it EB-2, EB-3. So employment-related green cards, but not the NIW category. So it could be EB-2 if you have a master's degree, or it could be EB-3 if you have a bachelor's, or even without a higher education. So which of those two do you think I prefer, and why? And I'm certainly curious to hear your opinions as well. Now, the target audience for these two categories is quite different, and I'll have to admit, a lot of times people, if they need to get some kind of employment in the US to ensure a green card, they might likely not have $800,000 of cash lying around that they could invest in an EB-5. But on the other hand, too, there are probably quite a few investors out there who have $800,000, but they want to get their family over to the US as quickly as possible. And if needed, sure, maybe they can, get some kind of employment and use that instead to get to the US faster. So, assuming you have an option open to you both of either through employment, we've got enough cash that you can invest in the EB-5, what do I think is faster? Well, certainly until recently, I would say they were very comparable. And in fact, I probably would have to admit that the EB-2, EB-3 would even be faster. Again, certainly before the Reform Act for EB-5 was passed in 2022, EB-2, EB-3 was definitely faster. No doubts about it. I mean, it was probably taking, I don't know, maybe 18 months on average to get the processing done, and then you go to the interview. So, under 2 years for sure, you're good to go. Whereas back then, before 2022, EB-5 was taking, minimum 2 years, if not 3 or 4, and maybe even sometimes 5 years. So I would say before the Reform Act of a few years ago for EB-5, EB-2, EB-3 was probably the way to go from a speed perspective. Now, of course, there's some people that might say, I don't want to come to the US and start working. I want to retire. I've got my own business and stuff like that. So we're putting aside these other considerations. We're primarily looking at speed. Now, things have changed quite a bit. And if you look at our other video where we compare NIW to EB-5, the contrast is even starker. But even in the EB-2, EB-3 space, the waiting times are still pretty long. They're not that much worse than they used to be, unlike NIW. NIW, the waiting time is just expanded exponentially. With EB-2, EB-3, it's maybe where it has always historically been, so that hasn't changed too much. But what has changed is EB-5. EB-5 has gotten so much shorter, so much faster, and I would say also so much more reliable. With the new law and the increased regulation, you have much lower risk for clients, for investors. Whereas in the past, there were some regional centers out there that should not have been allowed to operate in this space. And the increased regulations have cleared out the riffraff, as we say, gotten rid of some of the players that shouldn't have been in the market. And so I think for the most part, the remaining EB-5 regional centers that are out there are very reliable. They've been here, they've been around quite a while, and they have very good track records. But even that issue aside, if we're looking at speed, folks, EB-5, especially if it's a rural area, I mean, you're seeing approvals in the matter of months. I would say a year is probably a really slow case for EB-5. There's no way you're going to get through all that, the processes with Department of Labor, CIS, and everything else with an EB-2 or an EB-3. Like I said, EB-2, EB-3 is at least a year and a half to get through all the processing. Whereas you're doing an EB-5, and I would strongly recommend a rural area project, you're getting that done in 6 months, 12 months, worst case scenario. And moreover, what's no less important is while you're waiting for that EB-5, if you're able to get to the US, say on a tourist visa, you can get adjustment of status, giving yourself and your spouse and your family employment authorization and travel documents, advanced parole, allowing you basically to have all the rights of a green card holder while you're waiting for the EB-5. You don't get that with an EB-2, EB-3. You don't get that even with an NIW. So for those reasons as well, I see the EB-5 is much more appealing if, again, your goal is speed, getting your family over here, staying here, living here, working here, even while you're still waiting for a decision, and then getting that decision as quickly as possible. folks, it's hands down EB-5 all the way. So if you have any questions, what option might be best for you, please feel free to reach out to us, because we would be more than happy to advise you on how to best make your transition to the US and get here as soon as possible.